How cloud computing could help small business. And I personally think the greatest opportunity today for public cloud is with small and medium-sized business. First, because small and medium-sized business doesn't have the legacy infrastructure that most large enterprises have. So without that legacy infrastructure, they can adapt or embrace cloud computing technologies much faster. And as we mentioned today, cloud computing really represents equal opportunity IT. So cloud computing is going to provide the same small business, the same competitive advantage that historically only large enterprises had. The large enterprises who could afford massive investments in IT, had lots of development resources. Now with cloud computing, specifically public cloud, a small retailer, a small manufacturer can go to market and find the type of IT services that they need. They can consume those and gain the same competitive advantage. So I really think it's going to level the playing field for both small business and large business, allowing them to focus on their core businesses.
What about protecting the client of the managed service provider? So the small business person who would like to go to the cloud, but they may not have a legal department who can tell them about liability issues. Is there anything developing there in terms of framework or consulting or assistance to the small business person?
The responsibility sits with the cloud providers themselves. I mean, they've got to recognize that they're taking on not just the responsibility of the direct customer, let's say in the case of the small, medium-sized business, they're taking on the responsibility of their end user, of the end user as well, whose information they're ultimately hosting, and must ensure that they meet whatever the sort of the legal compliance standards happen to be, because otherwise it's their particular client that's going to find themselves potentially offside.
For small and medium businesses, cloud computing provides, my favorite quote actually from a customer says, "I am a small and medium business. Cloud computing makes me look big." So let me pull that apart a little bit. Using cloud services as a small and medium business gives me access to CRM, customer relationship management systems, ERP systems, and a myriad of other capabilities that I couldn't afford to implement in my small and medium business. And I can access them on demand, pay for all what I need, and do that on all the functions that I want. So they make me, the small and medium business, appear bigger than I am. And that's the number one reason I think we'll see that the small and medium businesses take on cloud, is that it makes them appear bigger than they are. And in this global marketplace, of course, that capability gives you access to markets that are perhaps bigger than you currently have access to, and thus enable you to appear bigger than you are and act bigger than you perhaps otherwise are. And so that's, I think, where cloud will really help the small and medium businesses grow.
There is an impact on the people if we go towards cloud computing, for sure, because it's a more efficient system. But what's going to happen is that the nature of the work that they do will be different. It will be better. Instead of doing menial, low-level work, they will do a lot of work with the business people. They will focus on business requirement, business analysis. They will focus on solution providing instead of technical stuff. And a lot of the technical people who are left behind, they can join the cloud, because the cloud does not mean less significant people, be less people, but you still need a lot of people. And as you know, the computer industry is growing, expanding, so there will be enough business to absorb a lot of them. And some of them may have to probably reskill and do something else. I think IT professional and maybe procurement professionals will be impacted by the cloud, because you will no longer need technical resources within the organization, because you will now go to the cloud for getting technical solutions. So you don't need them inside. But what you need inside is skills in understanding what the cloud is, understanding how the cloud can deliver the solution to the business. So you need to enhance the skills on the business side and understand the business more, work with the business leadership to develop solutions that enable them to meet their business outcome. So, so that's what I would say the biggest impact. Now, on the procurement people, because today you do a lot of contracts because you build the stuff yourself, you buy the stuff yourself, you buy the infrastructure. Well, that will not be necessary anymore. So there will be less requirement for contracting, for procurement, for those kind of services. But I would say that would summarize it.
I lead the IT transformation group, and what that means is we're an organization of consultants that work with customers to really help them change the way they manage, change the way they leverage, and change the way they embrace technology. So we help a lot of customers deploy new cloud technologies, help customers rationalize their portfolio. We heard from the panelists today, one of the key things to get towards cloud is to really help standardize your application stack, standardize your architecture so you can start to leverage those environments. So we help customers, with data center consolidation, help them with application rationalization, and really help them prepare to move to cloud computing.
When you look at the CIO's my garage of stuff that you inherit when you become a CIO as in an enterprise, there's a lot of legacy, and 80% of your budget is spent on that, 20% on the innovation. I think that cloud is another delivery mechanism, whether public or private. So the garage gets a little more complicated when you add private cloud in there, because you now have another environment to manage. And yet at the same time, you can take some of those privately run elements and complexity and outsource it and simplify. So things get a little more complicated and things get a little less complicated with cloud. So where do we get in the long run with cloud? I'd like to say everything's in the cloud in 10 years, but I don't think that's true. I think what we'll find is you'll still have your mainframe for those things that work well on the mainframe, your distributed systems for those things that make the most sense on distributed systems, and then you're going to add cloud to that too in the large enterprise. For the small and medium business, I think we'll see a lot of small and medium business IT needs driven by the cloud for a lot of the reasons mentioned in the previous comments. It's simple, it's fast, it makes you appear bigger than you are, and it's pay as you go, and all of those elements become very important to driving your business in a cost-effective manner if you're small and medium businesses.
For the cloud to really be functional to the end user, there has to be ways to optimize the transmission, the protocol mechanisms. I would just like to know what the plans are for optimizing the WAN to make the cloud more useful to the end user.
From a purely telco perspective, so my name is Sean McCartan. I'm the Director of Product Management for Hosting and Cloud Computing in Bell Canada. And that is one of the things that we would like to try to address. I mean, from our perspective, Bell isn't in the software business, but we're partnering with major SaaS providers to provide really three things: availability, performance, and security. So hosting the data in Canada, which, to your point about security, delivering application performance, so guaranteeing end-to-end SLA over a private network. We can't do that over the public internet. There's nothing that really we can, I mean, you could certainly drop WAN accelerator devices at one end or the other, but the problem with truly cloud-enabled software, for example, if you're using Google Apps, you have no idea what instance or what literal data center they're going to have your part of their global database. So we're trying to sort of scale the cloud back to Canadian instances to deliver that sort of security and performance, and it'll be a bit of the value-added differentiation. But that's a legitimate issue that I don't think that a lot of cloud SaaS providers can really address easily, because you are really reliant on the public internet. I mean, with ubiquitous access over a iPad or an iPhone or any sort of wireless device comes a bit of the downside that you really do give up a fair amount of control over the network. So that's what we're trying to do as a telco provider, but it's not a sort of a straightforward, easy thing to do.
Dr. Kavukian, who is our privacy commissioner, of course, is very concerned about regulations, but she knows and she understands that regulations is not the only way. And certainly you can have an awful lot of regulations in place where they're not, only the tip of the iceberg is ever going to be discovered. So we're introducing a concept which actually was raised in Jerusalem, and it was adopted unanimously by the international data protection community, which is privacy by design. And it's a concept that both the industry technologists and consumers have to become more aware of in terms of what are the practical ways of incorporating and embedding privacy into the design. And it may sound kind of fluffy up there out in the clouds, lots of clouds out there today. But certainly, if you look at the steps, there are 7 foundational principles that are easily adopted and can be easily communicated and can make a real difference in terms of consumer confidence and consumer trust.
These panels have always been a great way to kind of entice us to think a little bit outside of the box, a little longer term vision. What should the industry be doing instead of focusing on short term dollars, IT budgets? Where do you see Canada relative to the other developed countries? So 45% or just under half said on par. I think, right, that Canada is probably consuming a little less cloud than the US. The Canadian IT industry seems to be much more deliberate and require much more business justification before they launch into the next paradigm.